couples whose wedding was an absolute catastrophe. What happened? Two things. 70 more guests showed up than were invited. Turns out Mill was inviting people and not telling us. We ran out of chairs, food, everything. Except wine. We had plenty of that. Someone stole the wedding gifts. The wedding was nothing as expected, but the marriage has been nothing but a blessing. It rained non-stop. The venue was outside with a gazebo type structure. We still held it there, just closer to the middle so we wouldn't get wet. We had a low budget wedding, so no live band, just a DJ. We gave him the music for the first husband-wife song at rehearsal and all was good. Once it was time for the dance, he played the wrong song 3 times, until my husband had it and left me standing in the middle while he went to put the dang music himself. We hired a professional photographer and also asked our families to take pics with the 3 cameras that we had. We have a total of 10 pictures for the whole thing. The professional photographer only had 6 good pictures. Everything else was ruined for some reason. The pictures taken with our cameras were all ruined also. This was 17 years ago, so I am fuzzy on the details. But all in all, we only got 4 pictures from those cameras. We were to stay at a hotel in the honeymoon suite and then the next day travel to our honeymoon destination. When we arrived to the hotel around 1 in the morning, I think, they had already given the honeymoon suite to a family because they forgot it was reserved. So we had to stay in a regular room. So my cousin recently got married to his long-term partner and the actual wedding itself went really well. The reception directly after the ceremony, however, was marred somewhat by the bride's parents announcing halfway through the night and completely out of the blue that they would be divorcing. Wow, I'd be freaking pee. Reminds me of people who propose at someone else's wedding. Unless you have permission by the couple, you just don't do it. In that scenario though, they just shouldn't have said a dang word to begin with. Not my wedding, but a close friend's colleague. So much went wrong, but I'll summarize. Unexpected heavy rain. Wedding ceremony shifted to inside venue. Ceiling collapsed from heavy rainfall right on top of elaborate wedding cake. Luckily the bride and groom had a very good sense of humor, and if I recall correctly, the venue refunded a fair amount of what they had paid out of goodwill. My aunt and uncle were getting married outside in fall, at a beautiful garden. All the guests arrived but the priest did not. Finally they got a call from the hospital saying the priest had food poisoning. So they grabbed a waiter, sent a groomsman to the Halloween store, and had a wedding where they were married by a suspiciously waitery looking priest. It was that waiter's time to shine. My sisters. As we were sitting down to eat, a guest started screaming. The groom's mother went into cardiac arrest. I called 911. They came and attended to her, and as we were outside watching them load her into the ambulance, I heard more screaming. Someone ran out and told me that they had better come back into the venue. I run inside and see my grandfather laying on the floor. I ended up riding with him to the hospital. I think he just fainted from the commotion, but we didn't know that at the time. They took both of them to the same hospital. Doctor looked at both of them as they were being wheeled in and remarked, "Must have been one heck of a party." I can appreciate a doctor with a sense of humor, but I hope everyone was alright in the end. Not my wedding but my parents. I wasn't around to experience it, but their friends and family still talk about it to this day. The main culprit was the heavy rain that caused minor flooding and tons of road closures. Mother was very late to the church. My father broke down, convinced that she was going to be a no-show. Not only was the taxi that was taking her to the church late due to road closures, it also managed to hit her as she was running to get in, causing a small rip and minor staining on her dress. A few members of the bridal party were so late they completely missed the ceremony. At the hotel reception, the DJ could not figure out how to get to the venue due to road closures, and being unfamiliar with the area. The first half of the reception was basically quiet until the groomsmen found that the restaurant in the hotel had a jukebox. The restaurant let them move it to the banquet hall where they paid quarters for music. Almost half of their guests did not come, again due to the rain. The hotel was understaffed due to the road closures, so food took a very long time to come out. A guest who must have been literally dying of hunger helped herself to the wedding cake prior to it being cut. It really sucked on the day, but now they look back on it and laugh. Whenever we're at a wedding now and the bride is on the verge of tears due to things not going perfectly, my mom will always say, "Don't worry about it. I got hit by a car on my wedding day and everything still worked out." LOL, that kind of ended on a fairly wholesome note. My uncle decided that I should run the camera at the wedding since I was the most technically literate out of the family. What he failed to realize was that I was technically literate because I pressed all the buttons to figure out what they do. So his wedding video is a combination of weird zooming, different lighting settings flashing on and off, and parts cutting in and out as I fiddled with other settings. The last minute of them walking out of the church looked great though once I got everything dialed in. So his wedding video is a combination of weird zooming, different lighting settings flashing on and off, and parts cutting in and out. So a Mr. Bean's holiday kind of wedding video. I was a groomsman in a wedding for my uncle and his fiancée. I was maybe 14 and pretty nervous. I stood up straight as a board, knees locked apparently. It turns out when you stand up with your knees locked you start the pass out timer. My timer ran out during the vows. My recently widowed mother was losing her crap, arms flailing wildly in the air as she ran to check on me screaming, "Oh my baby," over and over. The wedding was paused as 10 people rushed to save me. We still watch it on VHS from time to time. Pretty funny these days. My other uncle didn't put me in the wedding party a couple months later. Never found out why. Not my wedding. Thank God. Friend's sister got married. Big Italian wedding. No one but the bride is sure about the groom. Mom is helping the bride on with her dress and saying, "You can still back out. I promise I won't say anything about the money." 1 hour into the reception the bride is drunk off her butt in the ladies' room, screaming, "I've made a terrible mistake." Marriage lasted, I think, 4 months. Then she ran off with his best friend and he, the groom, shot himself. I browse Reddit in the morning to start my day for heartwarming stories like this. Not my wedding, but the groom kissed me on the dance floor, touched several other women without consent. The priest was a creep and grabbed my friend's butt. The groom accused the bride of cheating with the bartender, who is gay and a friend of ours for years. The groom ended up throwing his ring into the woods at the end of the night. The bride stayed in a friend's hotel while he went home and went into a rage. They are actually on their honeymoon at the moment. Idiots. I'm sure that will last, LOL. Not my wedding, but I was working a wedding for dinner service and during the reception out in the yard of an event hall. As the bride was walking down the aisle, the automatic sprinklers turned on under everyone's chairs and everyone went running and was soaking wet. Honestly, it seemed they thought it was more funny than anything, but I can't even imagine. 1. The DJ took the money and ran, went out of business and didn't bother letting me know, so we played iPhone music on a little speaker all night. 2. There were two separate fires, a grease fire from the catfish being fried on site, and a fire from the fireworks set off at the wrong time, right after the ceremony, when it was still light out. Although if they'd been set off at night, everybody would have been too drunk to put out the fire, so I guess that was a good thing. 3. It was about 20 degrees warmer than usual for the season, so I was absolutely dying in my very elaborate dress, which wasn't finished until 2 days before the wedding because the seamstress was fired and nobody at the boutique bothered to check on her work until my mother swept in and started kicking butt. That entire chain went out of business a year later. 4. I ended up hating most of the pictures. The photographer was not very creative and I ended up having to direct her for most of the shoot, which was exhausting. 5. Bonus. A hurricane hit our honeymoon destination the day before we got there, so it was pouring the entire time except, of course, the day we left. On the other hand, people still tell me our wedding was the prettiest they'd ever been to, and the actual ceremony was the most moving experience of my life. I would do so many things differently if I could, but a wedding isn't a marriage, and my marriage is pretty great. My mom has some regrets about her wedding. Foremost being making her own wedding dress. Her one chance to wear an elaborate dress, but they were poor. But it's been a good marriage. 40 plus years and counting. She always tells brides, whatever happens, you're just as married afterward. Mother-in-law made the wedding about herself. Not the biggest issue though. She did 2 things I'll never forget. 1. Made the table layout for our guests and completely left off the family friend and his wife that performed the funeral service for my mother who had passed less than a month before my wedding. 2. Again my mother-in-law, drunk as heck already on wedding wine before we even started getting dressed, approached me right as we were doing the group pictures and said congratulations. Looks like I'm now the new mom. And then she noticed the rage-filled look on my face and quietly said, "In-law." She was sitting next to the rose I had placed on my mother's chair before the service started. Needless to say, that entire day was an emotional roller coaster. Oh, and the night before at the rehearsal dinner, my dumbass sister who was a bridesmaid totaled my mother's car she was illegally driving, while intoxicated, right in front of the restaurant and had my soon-to-be wife hold her purse while she spoke to the police without telling her there was a pipe and bag of weed in it. I'll never forget May to June of 2017. Many years ago I worked in the wedding industry for 5 years video. Here's a snippet of disasters. Mother of the groom got really drunk and fell onto the wedding cake. Caught on camera. Best man went to the bathroom, took his wedding ring off to wash his hands, left it on the counter, but not even a minute later he went back in and it was gone. Never found it. Only family and friends at the wedding. Mother of the bride spilt liquid foundation down the front of her raw silk dress before they left the house. Had to wear a different outfit. Wedding reception set up an entire wedding for approx 400 guests, with the totally wrong color scheme, flowers and food. There was a wedding the next day, and unbelievably the bride and groom of that wedding had exactly the same names. First and last. Bride and groom were on their honeymoon, came back and found their house had been broken into, every stick of furniture taken, every gift taken, every wall broken, sinks ripped out and glass smashed. Police found out it was the ex-BF of the bride. One bride, unfortunately, miscalculated her monthly cycle, got out of the car at the church and Okay, not the level of catastrophe you're probably looking for, but here goes. 1. The wedding was supposed to be a small family gathering. The restrictions no children and only bring one guest were the subject of bitter fights and, ultimately, us relenting on both points as the date drew nearer. The child who was the source of the most contentious of these screamed and cried through the vows. 2. The wedding was to be a beach wedding. We rented out the presidential suite at a hotel for the reception, and had the exact spot on the beach picked out. Every day 4 weeks preceding the wedding. The weather at the time of the ceremony was perfect. 70 degrees and a slight breeze. With the ceremony minutes away, the wind kicked up to high enough speeds that the sand on the beach was whipping up so violently we couldn't walk across it, let alone have the ceremony as planned. We therefore had to move the ceremony into the suite we had reserved for the reception. 3. The move of the ceremony was complicated by the fact that we were unable to check into the room until about 5:30 p.m. when the manager of the hotel who, until that day, was a friend of my wife's, had promised us an early check-in so we could get set up. My mom went into managerial mode and started getting things set up, but the room was still pretty much a mess at the time of the exchanging of the vows. 4. My wife's brother is addicted to pills, and in his opioid-induced haze, lost the rings. 5. During the ceremony, officiated by my sister, her bosom popped out of the dress my wife specifically requested she not wear. 6. The place we ordered food from just gave most of our food away. My wife's mom was to be the one to go pick it up. She took the receipt and the emails we had exchanged about the order. When she got there, they apologized and offered to remake the portion of the food they sold to walk-in customers. She accepted, and 2 hours later, she arrived to the reception with food, where everyone was pretty wasted from the absurdly strong drinks my father-in-law was making. The only food they could have eaten in the meantime had been seized upon by seagulls. 7. Hotel maintenance showed up later on in the evening because the folks in the room above us let their bathtub overflow, and they wanted to check to make sure there were no leaks in our room. There were, so the most accessible bathroom was unavailable for a while. 8. This was September of 16. So, of course, a heated argument took place about the election. 9. The hotel oversold for that night, as is customary, I know, so my aunt who cannot walk did not have a bathroom in her room that was handicap accessible. She had expected a beach view, and instead, looked at a wall. 10. Not technically part of the wedding, but I learned I had been laid off in the middle of our honeymoon. My mom used to do music at weddings. She said the worst one she ever did was when the bride was 8 months pregnant with twins. The groom's family hated her for not having an abortion, not giving the kids up for adoption, wearing white at the wedding, trapping him, etc. Real awful stuff. Anyway, they all still show up for the wedding, but refuse to stand when the processional starts. For a church wedding where you're supposed to stand, minister asks what's wrong. They tell him in the service and say they're protesting the wedding. Minister ends up yelling at them and says they'll stand or he'll kick them out of his church. On the other hand, my mom said the best wedding she ever did was a couple who wanted to be married as quickly as possible. Processional, vows, recessional, just over a 3-minute ceremony. That minister's a good dude. Not mine, but at my sister's wedding, marrying a Marine she just met, I got into a fist fight. Best man threw up during speech. Her dress caught on fire. My uncle announced he was leaving my aunt for a 21-year-old. Drunk cousin spilled the beans about my sister being pregnant to my very conservative grandma, and we all got food poisoning for the caterer. Hopefully her next one this winter is better. Right after we said I do, my father-in-law collapsed and passed out. He came to briefly and then went down again while we waited for the ambulance to arrive. He vehemently did not want to go to the hospital but was finally convinced and admitted for the night. Luckily he was okay, just dehydrated and embarrassed, and we were able to pick him up the next day. Glad everything ended alright. My friend's venue burned down during the reception. They were in the paper and on the evening news. The venue made things right with all of it, but that was a heck of a way to start a marriage. Satan himself telling them to turn back. A friend's wedding. Worst one I've been to. One of the bridesmaids said she would be part of the party and play the piano for the whole ceremony only if the bride refused to use or submit to husband's bulls during vows. Bride agreed and then an hour before the ceremony told the bridesmaid that she was going back on her promise. Have you ever heard wedding music played angrily on a piano? How about having the piano player need to stare at you while you're in the pews the whole time to try and keep their cool? 2. During the sermon portion of this wedding, the pastor started the speech with, "If there is one thing I know about this marriage, it is that this will not last." I had a 104-degree fever. It was 86 degrees at an outdoor wedding. I passed out mid-ceremony, stood up, then vomited in the grass. I sat down, was given Gatorade, then vomited again. We finished the ceremony in lawn chairs, me without my jacket and with a wet towel around my neck. During reception, cousin threatened to kick my wife's cousin's butt because he asked my cousin not to smoke next to his baby. Went to honeymoon anyways. Left honeymoon after 1 day and went to the hospital. Didn't die. Huge success. Married 11 years, 3 kids, 4th on the way. My mother-in-law accidentally on purpose destroyed our favor boxes. Our photographer had a stroke before the wedding but assured us she would still come and take pictures. She came, but without her camera. Our cat peed on my wife's wedding gown then ran away the night before the wedding, forcing the bridesmaids to hunt through the neighborhood at night for it. The wedding cake was disgusting and in the wrong colors. The restaurant that was to host our rehearsal dinner cancelled at the last minute, leaving us to cram 50-some people in the kitchen area of a local seafood place. They were extremely kind and accommodating. The mother and father of the bride showed up 10 minutes before the wedding, not even dressed, wanting us to help them get ready. And for good measure, on our honeymoon, we had the license plate stolen off our car. Happily married 10 years now. Glad to hear it all worked out despite the crap beginning. The father of the bride and his brother get drunk. Nothing out of the ordinary and they are harmless drunks but can get a little mouthy. A fight breaks out and the cops come, and of all the people they arrest it's the dad and the uncle. As I said, they are harmless but mouthy and the local cops didn't like being called mother suckers so they beat the crap out of them. The uncle was a cop from the neighboring city and protocol is if a cop is arrested the arrested guy's department has to come pick them up. So, the police show up to get their drunken comrade and see that he's been tuned up and that doesn't go over very well and guns are drawn and words are exchanged but nobody is hurt. This goes to court and the judge's only statement is, there's a fight of 50 people and the only 2 you arrest is the father of the bride and his brother. Case dismissed. But that wasn't the end of it because they still had to deal with the local PD beating up a cop and his brother. Sadly, the blue wall was in full effect and the uncle cop wouldn't testify against the guys who beat him up. The bride and groom had a great time and didn't know anyone went to jail until after the reception. My wife and I had a beach wedding planned in Key West. We were on a cruise, but had some family on the hot with us and some who flew to Key West directly. Long story short, it was too windy and we couldn't safely port in Key West. We enjoyed the rest of the cruise and just did our vows at the reception we had planned back home. Now we celebrate 2 different anniversary dates and it's a fun memory. A family member's almost wedding. Groom got cold feet and left a few days before the ceremony, but as the bride's family had traveled from all over we decided to stay at the hotel and have fun anyway. On the day their ceremony should have been, a dead baby blue whale washed up on a local beach, so we went to see it. On the way to see said dead whale, a dog owned by someone and the wedding party went missing. He fell off a cliff and was found by Coast Guards that evening. On the upside, she's happily married to a way better guy now. The last 2 points are great cocktail party stories, and the bride's happily so far after is a good ending too. Coworker told me this a few weeks ago and I can't stop laughing. Photographer quit the day before the wedding and the bride's dad didn't tell her because he didn't want her to stress. The day of the ceremony, she saw her dad directing the photographer and micromanaging him before the actual photos. She tells him to stop and let the guy do his job. Turns out, her dad, a cop, got a crime scene photographer from work to do the photography. What a great dad. My cousin got married and her family is Mexican. Groom's family are Irish. They all went out the night before the wedding and of course got smashed. And one of the Irish family members asked to see a watch of a Mexican family members. He put it on and walked away. That turned into a drunken brawl between the entire groom's family versus the entire bride's family. The groom was late as he and all the Mexicans were taken to jail on assault charges, while the Irish guys were let go. The wedding was hours late but happened. The cops probably didn't have a paddy wagon. My older sisters are 16 and 17 years older than me. I was the flower girl at both of their weddings when I was 4 and 5. At sister Jackie's wedding our cousin who is a couple years older than me was the ring bearer. Just before pictures were being taken, I got in an argument with my cousin because he wouldn't share a bag of chips with me, then hit me with one of those big yellow kids bats and takes off to the street. I start screaming and crying. So my sister takes off in her wedding dress chasing my cousin around all the parked cars on our street with me screaming in the background. All of this was filmed from the balcony and is still hilarious to watch. Needless to say we didn't get too many photos. At Sister Judy's wedding, someone forgot to put a slip on me under the flower girl dress and it was itchy as frick. To this day I have never worn something as itchy. As pictures started I was bawling my eyes out and hysterical. No one could calm me down. My sister's mother-in-law is yelling about what idiot didn't put my slip on and starts stuffing tissues under my dress. I swear to God that woman had 5 boxes of tissues in her purse and stuffed them all in my dress. Again I helped create some terrible wedding photos. Finally a story with a good mill. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.